Picture this. You're limping down a suburban street on a sprained ankle, your 14-month-old daughter on your hip, while the woman who took your car sits in her $1 million house telling everyone at church what a grateful daughter-in-law you should be. For 18 months, I believed I was the problem. I believed losing my car, my job, my savings, and my freedom was just the price of being a good wife. Until my father drove by that October afternoon and asked one question that shattered everything. Maya, where's your car? What happened in that courtroom 3 weeks later exposed the $47,000 they stole, the apartment they rented without my name, and the text messages where my mother-in-law wrote, "Keep her dependent, she won't leave if she can't survive alone." My name is Maya Watson Wheeler, 29 years old, and this is how I escaped a prison without bars. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. 3 years ago, I married Derek Wheeler at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in Upper Arlington, Ohio. 180 guests. White roses cascading from every pew. A string quartet playing Pachelbel as I walked down the aisle toward the man I thought would protect me forever. But here's what I remember most about that day. Judith Wheeler, my mother-in-law, sitting in the front row wearing an ivory dress. Not white, ivory. Close enough that 3 of my bridesmaids whispered about it in the bathroom. Close enough that my mother pulled me aside and asked if I wanted her to say something. I told her no. It was just a dress. The first sign I missed came during the reception. I'd spent 4 months planning the menu with the caterer: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, a lemon tart that reminded me of my grandmother's recipe. When the servers brought out the food, it was prime rib, mashed potatoes, chocolate cake. "I made a few adjustments," Judith said when I found her near the head table. She smiled like she was doing me a favor. "You don't understand the palate of our community, dear. Trust me, this is better." I looked at Derek. He shrugged. "Mom just wants everything to be perfect. She's trying to help." That night, in our hotel room, I told myself it was just a menu. I told myself mothers-in-law are supposed to be involved. I told myself that family meant compromise, and compromise meant letting go of small things. I had no idea how many small things I would let go of over the next 3 years. I had no idea that each one was a test, and every time I stayed silent, I passed. I passed right into a cage I couldn't see until it was already locked. 14 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. The morning sickness hit like a freight train. By week 8, I couldn't keep down anything but saltines and ginger ale. By week 12, I'd missed so many days at Morrison and Hartley Financial that my supervisor called me into her office. "Maya, we love your work," she said, "but we need consistency. Is there something going on?" I wanted to tell her the truth, that I was throwing up 6 times a day, that I could barely stand without getting dizzy, that my doctor had recommended bed rest for at least 2 weeks. Instead, I apologized and promised to do better. That night, Judith came to our apartment with a casserole and a proposal. "You should quit your job," she said, setting the dish on our counter like she was laying down a verdict. "Move into the house with us. I'll take care of everything. The nursery, the meals, the doctor's appointments. A baby needs its mother full-time." I hesitated. I'd worked 6 years to become a senior financial analyst. I had clients who trusted me, a 401k I'd been building since I was 23, a sense of identity that existed outside of anyone else's expectations. "It's temporary," Derek said. "Just until the baby's 6 months old. Mom's right, you need rest. And my salary covers everything anyway." 6 months. That was the agreement. I would take 6 months to recover, to bond with my daughter, to figure out the next chapter. Judith smiled when I finally nodded. "You're finally understanding what it means to be a mother," she said. "A real mother puts her family first." That was 14 months ago. No one has mentioned me going back to work since, and somehow I stopped asking. The car disappeared in January. Lily was 4 months old. She had her 2-month vaccines coming up, a pediatric appointment I'd scheduled 3 weeks in advance at Columbus Children's on the east side, a 20-minute drive from Judith's house in Upper Arlington. The morning of the appointment, I walked into the garage to find an empty space where my Honda Accord should have been. "Oh, I borrowed it," Judith said when I found her in the kitchen. She didn't look up from her crossword puzzle. My Lincoln is in the shop. Just for a few days, dear. But Lily has a doctor's appointment. Today, at 10:30. Reschedule it. She filled in another word. Babies don't need to be on such rigid schedules. You're too anxious, Maya. It's not healthy. I rescheduled the appointment. I told myself it was just a few days. A few days became a week. A week became a month. By March, I'd stopped asking about the car altogether, because every time I brought it up, Judith had a new reason. The Lincoln was still being repaired. She needed the Honda to run errands for the church. Her niece Brittany was visiting from Cincinnati and needed transportation. In April, I saw Brittany posting Instagram photos from my car. My Honda Accord, with the dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into a mailbox 2 years ago, parked outside a restaurant in the short north. The car is still here, Derek said when I showed him the photos. It's not like it's gone. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. I still have the title in my wallet. Maya Watson Wheeler, printed in black ink on Ohio DMV letterhead. My name. My car. But I haven't driven it in 10 months. I don't know exactly when the Life 360 app appeared on my phone. I found it in June, buried in a folder of apps I never opened. The icon was small, a green circle with a white location pin. When I tapped it, a map loaded showing my exact position. 4847 Riverside Lane, Upper Arlington, OH. Judith's house. My prison. It's for safety, Judith explained when I asked. Her voice was patient, like she was speaking to a child. I worry about you and Lily when you're out. This way, I know you're safe. Don't you want me to know you're safe? I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that I was 29 years old, that I'd lived alone in Chicago for 4 years before meeting Derek, that I didn't need a tracking app to prove I was a responsible adult. But Derek was standing right there, and he said, "It's not a big deal, Maya. Mom just cares about us." So I kept the app. And I noticed that every time I went somewhere, the grocery store, the park, the pediatrician's office, Judith knew. She'd ask about my trip before I even took off my coat. She'd comment on how long I'd spent at Target. She'd wonder why I'd driven past the church on my way home. The phone calls to my father stopped gradually. Every time I talked to him, Judith would appear afterward with questions. What did Frank say? Is he criticizing how we're raising Lily? He doesn't understand our family, Maya. He never has. It was easier to stop calling. Easier to let the weeks turn into months. Easier to forget that I'd ever had a life outside these walls. 14 months without hearing my father's voice. I told myself he probably didn't notice. October 17th. I'll remember that date for the rest of my life. Lily woke up at 3 a.m. with a fever of 101.4. I held her against my chest, feeling the heat radiating through her onesie, and I knew she needed to see a doctor. Not tomorrow. Not when it was convenient. Now. But it was Tuesday, and Judith had taken my car to her weekly prayer breakfast. Derek was in Cleveland for a sales conference. I was alone in a $1 million house with a sick baby and no way to get her help. At 7 a.m., I knocked on Judith's bedroom door. Lily has a fever. I need to take her to the pediatrician. Can I use the car? 101 isn't serious, Judith said through the door. Give her some Tylenol. I have a meeting at the church at 9. Please. She's been crying for hours. Something's wrong. The door opened. Judith stood there in her silk robe, her face arranged in an expression of patient disappointment. Maya, you panic over everything. This is why you couldn't handle working. You're too emotional. Reschedule for tomorrow. The door closed. At 8:15 a.m., I strapped Lily into her carrier, wrapped a blanket around both of us, and started walking. The pediatric urgent care on Henderson Road was 2.3 miles away. I know because I'd mapped it on my phone the night before, when Lily's fever first spiked. My left ankle, sprained the week before when I slipped on the stairs, throbbed with every step. Lily weighed 22 pounds. The October air was 48 degrees. I made it 6 blocks before a familiar Ford F-150 pulled up beside me. My father rolled down the window. Maya, what the hell are you doing? I hadn't seen my father in 14 months. He looked older, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. But his voice was exactly the same. Gruff, direct, cutting through every excuse I'd built up in my head. "Where's your car?" he asked. The question was so simple, so obvious. And somehow, it broke something inside me that I'd been holding together with silence and denial for over a year. "His mom took it," I said, my voice cracked. "She said I should feel grateful they even let me stay." My father didn't respond right away. He just looked at me, really looked, taking in the limp, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I was clutching Lily like someone might try to take her from me. Then he said 5 words that changed everything. "Get in the car, now." He didn't ask why I hadn't called. He didn't lecture me about the choices I'd made. He just reached over and opened the passenger door, and I climbed in with Lily still pressed against my chest, and for the first time in 14 months, I felt like someone actually saw me. "We're going to the doctor first," he said, pulling back onto the road. "Then we're going to my house, and tonight we're fixing this." "Dad, I can't just—" "Yes, you can." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Maya, I've been a union electrician for 32 years. I know what it looks like when someone's being worked over. And sweetheart, you're being worked over." I started crying then. Really crying. For the first time since Lily was born. 14 months of silence and shame and self-doubt pouring out of me in the passenger seat of my father's truck. He just handed me a napkin from the glove compartment and kept driving. The pediatrician confirmed what I already knew. Lily had an ear infection, a prescription for amoxicillin, a follow-up in 10 days, and instructions to keep her hydrated. Normal, treatable, nothing that should have required a 2.3-mile walk on a sprained ankle. In my father's kitchen that afternoon, I told him everything. The ivory dress at my wedding, the menu change, the car, the Life 360 app, the credit cards that had been consolidated into an account I couldn't access. The way Judith questioned every phone call, every errand, every decision I tried to make for my own daughter. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. "Let me ask you something," he said. "You want Lily to grow up thinking this is how a man treats a woman? You want her to think it's normal to ask permission to buy diapers?" I looked at Lily, asleep in the portable crib my father had dug out of his garage, the same crib I'd slept in 30 years ago. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of the war being waged over her future. "No," I whispered. "Then you know what you have to do." "I don't have any money. I don't have a car. I don't have—" "You have me." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "And you have 72 hours. That's how long before they realize you're not coming back and start covering their tracks. You need evidence, Maya, bank statements, messages, anything that proves what they've been doing. And then what?" "Then we find you a lawyer. A good one." He squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore, sweetheart. You were never supposed to be alone." 72 hours. The clock started now. I went back to Judith's house that evening like nothing had happened. "Where were you?" Judith asked when I walked through the door. She was sitting in the living room with her reading glasses on, a church bulletin spread across her lap. "Lily had a fever. I took her to urgent care." I kept my voice neutral, calm, the way she'd trained me to sound when I wanted to avoid a confrontation. "You should have waited for me to get home. I would have driven you." "I know, I'm sorry." She studied me for a moment, then returned to her bulletin. "Derek called. He'll be home Thursday. Make sure the guest room is ready. His colleague is staying the weekend." Of course. That night, after Judith went to bed, I crept into Derek's home office. His laptop was on the desk, still logged into his email. I'd watched him type his password 100 times. Lily0823, our daughter's name and birthday. He'd never bothered to change it, never imagined I might need to access it. The bank statements were in a folder labeled Finances. I opened the most recent one, September 2024, and felt my stomach drop. Our joint savings account, the one we'd been building since we got married, had held $62,000 in March. Now it showed a balance of $15,000, $47,000, transferred in 6 installments to an account ending in 7743. I cross-referenced the account number with Derek's sent emails. It took less than 5 minutes to find the answer. The account belonged to Judith Wheeler. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots. Every statement, every transfer, every piece of evidence that my mother-in-law had been systematically draining our savings while telling me I should be grateful for her generosity. $47,000 gone. The second night, I found the iPad. It was in the drawer of Derek's nightstand, an older model he'd stopped using when he upgraded last year. I'd forgotten it existed until I was searching for a phone charger and my hand brushed against the cold glass screen. The device was still logged into his iMessage account. I scrolled back through months of conversations, past mundane exchanges about dinner plans and work schedules, until I found a thread with Mom that made my blood run cold. February 14th, 8 months ago. Judith. Don't let her use the car anymore. She'll start getting ideas about leaving. Derek. You think she'd actually go? Judith. Not if she can't. Keep her dependent. She won't leave if she can't survive alone. Derek. What about her dad? He keeps calling. Judith. Handle it. Tell her he's toxic. Tell her he doesn't support your marriage. She'll believe you. She believes everything. I read the messages 3 times, then 4, then 5. Keep her dependent. She won't leave if she can't survive alone. This wasn't a mother-in-law who was just trying to help. This wasn't a husband who was caught in the middle. This was a plan, a deliberate, calculated strategy to trap me in a life I couldn't escape. I took screenshots of every message. I emailed them to an account Judith didn't know about, a Gmail I'd created years ago for online shopping, one that had never been connected to any device in this house. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped somewhere between the 3rd and 4th reading, replaced by something colder, something harder. They thought I was too weak to leave. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The apartment lease was in Derek's drafts folder. I almost missed it. A half-finished email to a property management company, never sent but never deleted. The attachment was a signed lease agreement dated July 15th, 3 months before I walked out of that house with Lily on my hip. 1847 Riverside Drive, Apartment 4B, Columbus, OH 43212. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. Move-in date, November 1st. The tenant's name, Derek Allen Wheeler. Just Derek. No Maya. No mention of a wife or daughter. I stared at the document for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The security deposit was $2,400, the exact amount of one of the transfers to Judith's account. The monthly rent was $1,800, well within Derek's salary, but impossible for a woman with no job, no car, and no access to her own money. They weren't planning to keep me forever. They were planning to leave me with nothing. The timeline crystallized in my mind: drain the savings, isolate me from my family, establish Derek in a new apartment, then file for divorce with me looking like an unemployed, unstable mother who couldn't even drive herself to a doctor's appointment. Judith would testify about my emotional problems. The church friends would back her up. And Lily, my daughter, my reason for breathing, would grow up in that house, learning that women exist to serve and obey and be grateful. I saved the lease to my hidden email account, screenshot after screenshot, building a case I hadn't known I was going to need. At 3:07 a.m., on the 3rd night, I packed 1 bag. I lifted Lily from her crib without waking her, and I walked out the back door of Judith Wheeler's $1 million house for the last time. My father was waiting at the end of the street. The October air bit through my jacket as I hurried down the driveway, Lily's warm weight pressed against my chest. Every shadow looked like Judith. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a door opening behind me. My father's truck was idling at the corner, headlights off. I climbed into the passenger seat and buckled Lily into the car seat he'd already installed. The same one from his garage, cleaned and ready. "You get everything?" he asked. "I got enough." He pulled away from the curb without turning on his headlights until we were 2 blocks away. In the rearview mirror, the Wheeler house grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, swallowed by the darkness of a sleeping suburb. "I keep thinking she's going to wake up," I said. "Judith, I keep thinking she's going to look out the window and see us leaving." "Let her look." My father's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the road. "She can't stop you now." I looked down at Lily, still asleep in her car seat, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. She had no idea that her life had just changed. No idea that her mother had finally found the courage to walk away from everything that was supposed to be safe and stable and permanent. "I don't have anything," I whispered. "No money, no job, no home." "You have Lily." He glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that looked like pride. "And you have the truth." That's more than most people start with. The Wheeler house was worth $1.2 million. I left it with a diaper bag and a folder of screenshots. I had never felt richer in my life. If you're watching this, and the story feels familiar, if you've ever been told you should be grateful while everything was being taken from you, comment, "I see you" below. You're not alone. And if you want to know what happened when we walked into that courtroom, keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Rachel Thornton's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in German Village, the kind of place with exposed beams and framed diplomas covering every wall. She was 42 years old, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. "Tell me everything," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Start from the beginning." So I did. The wedding, the pregnancy, the car, the phone, the money, the messages. I laid out 18 months of my life like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was building. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled a legal pad toward her and started writing. "What you've described has a name," she said. "It's called coercive control, and as of 2023, Ohio recognizes it as a form of domestic abuse under House Bill 3. I felt something crack open in my chest. "So I'm not crazy, ungrateful, oversensitive?" Rachel looked up from her notes. "No, Mrs. Wheeler, you're a survivor, and you have more evidence than most people in your situation ever managed to gather." She walked me through the next steps: filing for a temporary protection order, requesting an emergency custody hearing, documenting everything in a timeline that a judge could follow. The hearing could happen within 3 weeks if we moved fast. "Judith will fight this," Rachel warned. "She'll bring character witnesses. She'll try to paint you as unstable. But the bank records don't lie. The text messages don't lie. And on November 14th, the truth will finally be heard." November 14th, 3 weeks away. For the first time in 18 months, I had a date on the calendar that belonged to me. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Rachel's office brought in a digital forensics specialist, a quiet man named Marcus Webb, who extracted the metadata from every screenshot I'd taken. He confirmed that the text messages were authentic, time-stamped, and unaltered. The evidence was bulletproof. These messages originated from devices registered to Derek and Judith Wheeler, Marcus wrote in his report. There is no indication of tampering or fabrication. The bank records were easier. I walked into the Chase branch on Broad Street with my ID and marriage certificate, and the branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd been there for 15 years, printed 6 months of statements with the bank's official letterhead. "I see this more often than you'd think," she said quietly as she handed me the folder. "Women who don't know their own money is being moved. I'm glad you're getting out." The medical records came last. My doctor documented the sprained ankle that had gone untreated for a week, the vitamin D deficiency from months of staying indoors, the 15 pounds I'd lost since Lily was born. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make headlines, just a slow, steady erosion of health that happens when someone else controls every aspect of your life. Judith will bring witnesses from the church, Rachel reminded me during our final prep session. She'll have people testifying that she's a pillar of the community, that you're the problem, but we have something better than character witnesses. What's that? The truth. Rachel closed her folder. And in a courtroom, the truth has a way of winning. November 14th was 3 days away. The evidence was ready. The witnesses were lined up. All that was left was to face the woman who had stolen 18 months of my life. Judith called on a Tuesday evening, 48 hours after I'd left her house. I was sitting in my father's living room when my phone lit up with her name. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but Rachel had told me to answer. Let her talk, she'd said. Ohio is a one-party consent state. Everything she says can be used. I pressed record before I pressed accept. Maya, Judith's voice was ice wrapped in silk. I think you've made your point. It's time to come home. I'm not coming back, Judith. Don't be dramatic. You have nowhere to go. No money, no car, no job. What exactly do you think you're going to do? Raise Lily in your father's spare bedroom? If I have to. A pause. When she spoke again, the silk was gone. You're making a mistake. I have 15 people from the church ready to testify about your mental state, your anxiety, your inability to cope. Do you really want a judge to hear about the time you had a panic attack in the grocery store? That was because you called me 17 times in 20 minutes asking where I was. That's not how the court will see it. Her voice hardened. Come home, Maya. We can forget this ever happened. But if you force me to go to court, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you really are. I took a breath, held it, let it out. I'll see you on November 14th, Judith. I hung up before she could respond. The recording was 4 minutes and 32 seconds long. Rachel listened to it the next morning and smiled for the first time since I'd met her. She just handed us her entire strategy, she said, and she doesn't even know it. The Sunday before the hearing, Judith went to church. I know this because Pastor David Hensley called me that afternoon, his voice heavy with concern. Maya, I wanted to reach out, he said. Judith shared what's been happening with the congregation. She's very worried about you. What exactly did she share? A pause. She said you've been struggling, that you left in the middle of the night without warning, that you've been making accusations that aren't true. Another pause. She asked us to pray for you. 15 people. That's how many members of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church signed statements supporting Judith Wheeler's character. 15 people who had never asked me how I was doing in 18 months. 15 people who had watched me disappear from Sunday services and never once wondered why. Pastor, did anyone ask to hear my side? Silence. I thought so. I hung up and sat in my father's kitchen, staring at the wall. This was Judith's territory, the church, the community, the carefully cultivated image of a devoted grandmother who only wanted what was best for her family. She had spent years building this network of support, and now she was weaponizing it against me. My father came in and poured himself a cup of coffee. Bad news? Judith has 15 character witnesses from the church. He snorted. Character witnesses don't mean much when you've got bank records showing she stole $47,000. What if the judge believes her? Then the judge is an idiot. He sat down across from me. But Maya, judges aren't idiots. They've seen this before. They know what it looks like when someone's putting on a show. I wanted to believe him. In 3 days, I would find out if he was right. The text messages started on Monday. First, it was Sarah Mitchell, a woman I'd known from my prenatal yoga class. Hey, I heard you and Derek are having problems. Judith mentioned you've been going through something. Let me know if you need to talk. Then it was my college roommate's mother, of all people. Sweetheart, I ran into Judith at the farmer's market. She seems so worried about you. Are you okay? By Tuesday afternoon, I'd received 11 messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months, some in years. All of them had the same concerned tone, the same careful phrasing, All of them had clearly been briefed by Judith Wheeler. The worst one came from Derek's cousin Amanda. "I don't know what's going on between you and the family, but Judith has always been so good to you. Maybe you should think about what you're throwing away." I didn't respond to any of them. What would I say? That the woman they all admired had systematically isolated me from my own family? That she'd stolen my money, tracked my location, and planned to take my daughter? They wouldn't believe me. They'd already chosen their side. "Let them talk," my father said when I showed him the messages. "The truth will be heard in court. And the truth doesn't need 15 witnesses. It just needs evidence." I put my phone face down on the table and tried to stop my hands from shaking. In 24 hours, I would walk into a courtroom and face the woman who had convinced an entire community that I was the problem. I would stand in front of a judge and tell the truth, and I would pray that evidence was enough to overcome a lifetime of carefully constructed lies. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. Lily was in the portable crib beside my bed, her breathing soft and steady in the darkness. I watched her for hours, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her tiny fingers curled against the blanket. If I lost tomorrow, I might lose her too. At 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Rachel." "I know you're not sleeping," she said. "I never sleep the night before a big hearing either. What if it's not enough? What if she has more witnesses, more—" "Maya." Her voice was calm, steady. "You have bank records showing $47,000 transferred without your knowledge. You have text messages proving deliberate isolation. You have a lease for an apartment your husband rented without your name. The evidence is overwhelming." "But she's so convincing. She makes everyone believe—" "She makes everyone believe because no one ever challenged her before. Tomorrow, we challenge her. And the thing about lies, Maya, they don't hold up under cross-examination." After we hung up, I pulled out my journal, a habit I'd started in the first week at my father's house, documenting everything I remembered about the last 18 months. I wrote, "Tomorrow, I will stand in front of a judge and tell the truth. Whatever happens, Lily will know her mother fought for her. Whatever happens, I will never go back to that house. Whatever happens, I am already free." At 2 a.m., I finally closed my eyes. At 6 a.m., my alarm went off. I showered, dressed in the navy blazer Rachel had helped me pick out, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, scared, but also something else. She looked ready. The Franklin County Family Court was a gray building on South High Street, all concrete and fluorescent lights. I arrived at 9:15 with Rachel on one side and my father on the other, Lily safe with a trusted neighbor back in Westerville. Judith was already there. She stood in the hallway outside courtroom 4B, wearing a black dress and a strand of pearls that probably cost more than my father's truck. Derek was beside her, looking everywhere except at me. Behind them, 8 members of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church sat on a wooden bench, their faces arranged in expressions of pious concern. "Maya," Judith's voice carried across the hallway. "You look tired, dear. Are you sure you're up for this?" Rachel put a hand on my arm. "Don't engage, let me handle her." We walked past them into the courtroom. 12 people total, the judge's clerk, a court reporter, a bailiff, and the rest of us arranged on opposite sides of the aisle like a wedding gone wrong. At exactly 9:30, Judge Patricia Holloway entered. She was 58 years old, according to Rachel's research, with 22 years on the family court bench. Her face revealed nothing as she took her seat and opened the file in front of her. "We're here on the matter of Watson Wheeler versus Wheeler," she said. "A petition for temporary protective order and emergency custody. Counsel, are both parties ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rachel said. "Yes, Your Honor," said Judith's lawyer, a silver-haired man from Harrison and Associates, whose hourly rate was probably triple Rachel's. Judge Holloway looked at me, then at Judith. Her expression was unreadable. "Then let's begin." Judith smiled at me from across the aisle, the smile of someone who had already won. She had no idea what was coming. Judith took the stand first. Her lawyer, Mr. Harrison, guided her through the testimony like a conductor leading an orchestra. Every word was practiced, every pause was calculated. I only wanted to help my daughter-in-law, Judith said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. When she became pregnant, she was so overwhelmed. I offered her a home, stability, support. I thought I was being a good mother. And how did Mrs. Wheeler respond to your generosity? She was grateful at first, but then she started to change. She became anxious, paranoid. She accused me of controlling her, of stealing from her. Judith's voice cracked. I don't know where these ideas came from. I've never taken anything that wasn't freely given. The church members nodded from their bench. Derek stared at his shoes. Mrs. Wheeler, can you describe the night your daughter-in-law left your home? It was 3 in the morning. Judith pressed the tissue to her lips. She took my granddaughter and disappeared without a word. No note, no explanation. I was terrified something had happened to them. And what do you believe is in the best interest of your granddaughter? Stability. Judith looked directly at the judge. Lily needs a stable home with people who can provide for her. Maya has no job, no income, no home of her own. She's living in her father's spare bedroom. How is that better than what we offered? Mr. Harrison nodded sympathetically. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Holloway made a note on her pad. Counsel for the petitioner, your witness. Rachel stood slowly, smoothing her jacket. She picked up a folder from the table, the folder containing 18 months of evidence. Mrs. Wheeler, she said, let's talk about what was freely given. Rachel approached the witness stand with the calm of someone who knew exactly where every question was leading. Mrs. Wheeler, you testified that you offered Maya a home. Is that correct? Yes. Was Maya's name on any deed or lease for that property? It's my house. Why would her name be on it? So she had no legal right to reside there? You could have asked her to leave at any time? Judith's smile flickered. I would never do that. But you could have, legally speaking. Rachel didn't wait for an answer. Let's talk about the car. You're aware that Maya owns a 2019 Honda Accord, registered in her name? She has a car, yes. Where is that car right now, Mrs. Wheeler? I've been using it. My Lincoln was in the shop. For 10 months? Silence. Mrs. Wheeler, the Lincoln was repaired in February. I have the service records from Thompson Automotive. Rachel held up a document. Yet you continued to use Maya's vehicle until she left your home in October. Can you explain that? She didn't need it. I drove her wherever she needed to go. So she couldn't go anywhere without your permission? That's not... Judith's voice rose. I was helping her. She was too anxious to drive. Too anxious. Rachel nodded slowly. Mrs. Wheeler, are you aware that a tracking application called Life 360 was installed on Maya's phone? For her safety. Did she consent to that installation? Another pause, longer this time. I don't remember the specifics. Let me refresh your memory. Rachel pulled out another document. The app was installed on March 15th, while Maya was at a pediatric appointment with Lily. She didn't know it was there until June. The church members shifted uncomfortably on their bench. Rachel returned to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit C into evidence. These are bank statements from Chase Bank, authenticated by branch manager Patricia Okonkwo, showing the joint savings account held by Maya and Derek Wheeler. Judge Holloway accepted the folder. Her eyebrows rose slightly as she reviewed the first page. Mrs. Wheeler, Rachel continued, these statements show that between March and September of this year, $47,000 was transferred from Maya and Derek's joint savings account to an account ending in 7743. Do you recognize that account number? Judith's face had gone very still. I don't recall. Let me help you recall. That account is registered to Judith Ellen Wheeler. That's you, isn't it? Derek gave me that money. He wanted to help with household expenses. $47,000 in household expenses? Over 6 months? Rachel let the question hang in the air. And was Maya informed of these transfers? She didn't need to be informed. Derek handles the finances. So Maya had no knowledge that nearly $50,000 of her marital assets were being transferred to her mother-in-law? I don't know what she knew. I think you know exactly what she knew. Rachel turned to the judge. Your Honor, Maya Wheeler was systematically denied access to her own money. Her credit cards were canceled. Her bank access was restricted. She had to ask permission to purchase diapers for her own child. Judge Holloway looked at Judith over the rim of her glasses. Mrs. Wheeler, did your daughter-in-law have independent access to any funds? Judith's lawyer started to object, but Judith spoke first. She didn't need access. We took care of everything. That, Rachel said quietly, is exactly the problem. Rachel picked up the final folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit D into evidence. These are text messages between Derek Wheeler and Judith Wheeler, extracted and authenticated by digital forensics specialist Marcus Webb. The metadata confirms they originated from devices registered to the respondents. She handed copies to the judge and to Judith's lawyer. Mr. Harrison's face went pale as he read. Mrs. Wheeler, I'm going to read a message you sent to your son on February 14th of this year. Rachel's voice was steady, almost gentle. Quote, Don't let her use the car anymore. She'll start getting ideas about leaving. End quote. Did you write that? Judith's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's taken out of context. Let me provide more context then. Your son responded, You think she'd actually go? And you replied. Rachel paused, letting the silence build. Not if she can't. Keep her dependent. She won't leave if she can't survive alone. The courtroom was completely still. I could hear the scratch of the court reporter's keyboard, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft intake of breath from the church members on their bench. Keep her dependent, Rachel repeated. Those are your words, Mrs. Wheeler, in your own text messages, describing a deliberate strategy to prevent your daughter-in-law from leaving an abusive situation. It wasn't abuse. Judith's voice was rising now, the careful composure cracking. I was protecting my family. She was going to take Lily away. She was going to leave. And you made sure she couldn't. Judge Holloway held up a hand. I've heard enough on this point. She looked at Judith with an expression I couldn't quite read. Counselor, do you have anything further? One more exhibit, Your Honor. The apartment lease. Rachel held up the final document. Exhibit E, Your Honor. A lease agreement for an apartment at 1847 Riverside Drive, signed by Derek Wheeler on July 15th of this year. The security deposit of $2,400 was paid from the joint account, the same account Maya had no access to. She walked the document to the judge's bench. You'll notice, Your Honor, that this is a one-bedroom apartment. The lease lists one tenant, Derek Allen Wheeler. There is no mention of Maya Wheeler. There is no mention of their daughter Lily. Judge Holloway studied the lease. Then she looked at Derek, who had been silent throughout the entire proceeding. Mr. Wheeler, would you like to explain this? Derek glanced at his mother. Judith gave him a small nod. It was a backup plan, he said, in case things didn't work out. A backup plan that didn't include your wife or daughter? I was going to... He stopped, started again. My mother said... Your mother said what, Mr. Wheeler? But Derek had nothing left to say. He just sat there staring at his hands, while the weight of 18 months of lies collapsed around him. Rachel returned to her table. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Maya Wheeler was subjected to systematic coercive control, as defined under Ohio House Bill 3. Her finances were controlled, her movements were tracked, her vehicle was confiscated. And when she finally found the courage to leave, she discovered that her husband had already been planning to abandon her, keeping only the child and the money. Judge Holloway closed the folder in front of her. Court will take a 15-minute recess. When we return, I'll deliver my ruling. Judith's face was the color of ash. We're at the most important moment of this story. If you're holding your breath waiting to hear what the judge decided, hit that like button and comment justice below. And if you know someone who's going through something similar, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward getting out. Now let's see what happened next. 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. I sat at the petitioner's table with Rachel beside me, watching the clock on the wall tick forward 1 second at a time. My father was in the gallery behind me. I could feel his presence without turning around. Judith and Derek sat on the opposite side of the aisle. The church members had stopped making eye contact with anyone. At 11:47 a.m., Judge Holloway returned. "Please be seated." She opened a folder and began to read. "In the matter of Watson Wheeler versus Wheeler, I have reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. The petitioner has provided documented proof of financial control, surveillance without consent, and deliberate isolation from family support systems." She looked up, her gaze settling on Judith. "The text messages entered into evidence are particularly troubling. The phrase, 'keep her dependent,' demonstrates a clear intent to restrict the petitioner's autonomy and prevent her from leaving an unhealthy situation. This court finds that the respondents engaged in a pattern of coercive control, as defined under Ohio Revised Code Section 3113.31. Judith started to rise. "Your Honor, Mrs. Wheeler, you do not have the floor." Judge Holloway's voice was ice. "Please sit down." Judith sat. "Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a temporary protection order for Maya Watson Wheeler and the minor child Lily Wheeler. Derek Wheeler is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the petitioner or the child. Judith Wheeler is prohibited from any contact, direct or indirect." I heard a sound behind me, my father exhaling. "Additionally, temporary custody of the minor child is awarded to Maya Watson Wheeler, pending a full hearing in 30 days. For the first time in 18 months, I could breathe. Judith Wheeler had been told to sit down and be silent, and she had no choice but to obey. Judge Holloway wasn't finished. "Regarding the financial matters raised in this petition," she continued, "the evidence shows that $47,000 was transferred from the marital account to Judith Wheeler without the petitioner's knowledge or consent. This court orders Derek Wheeler to restore those funds to the joint account within 60 days. I heard Judith inhale sharply. "Furthermore, the 2019 Honda Accord registered to Maya Watson Wheeler is to be returned to her possession within 48 hours. Any failure to comply will result in contempt charges." Derek's lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but Derek wasn't listening. He was staring at the table in front of him like a man watching his life collapse in slow motion. "Finally," Judge Holloway said, "given the complexity of this case and the documented pattern of financial abuse, the court orders that all legal fees incurred by the petitioner be paid by the respondents. Mrs. Thornton, please submit an itemized invoice to the court within 10 business days." Rachel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." This court is adjourned until the full custody hearing on December 14th. Judge Holloway gathered her papers. "I expect all parties to comply with the orders issued today. Any violations will be dealt with severely." She stood. We all stood. And then she was gone, disappearing through the door behind the bench. I turned to Rachel. "Is it over?" "The first round is over." She was smiling, actually smiling. "Maya, you won. You got the protection order, temporary custody, and financial restitution. That's everything we asked for. $47,000, my car, my daughter, my freedom. All of it, ordered to be returned." The judge had spoken in numbers and deadlines. But what I heard was something else entirely. "You were right. You were always right." We walked out of the courthouse through a different exit than Judith and Derek. Rachel had suggested it. No need for a confrontation in the parking lot, and I was grateful. I didn't want to see Judith's face. I didn't want to watch her try to spin this into another story where she was the victim. The November air was cold and clean. I stood on the courthouse steps and tilted my face toward the sky, letting the weak autumn sun warm my skin. "You did good in there," my father said. He was standing beside me, hands in his jacket pockets, looking out at the street like he was keeping watch. "I just told the truth." Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. We walked to his truck in silence. The city moved around us, cars, pedestrians, the ordinary rhythm of a Thursday afternoon. Nobody knew what had just happened in that courtroom. Nobody knew that a woman had just won back her life. "What happens now?" I asked as we climbed into the truck. Now we go pick up Lily, and then we go home. Home. My father's spare bedroom, with the portable crib and the boxes of my old things he'd saved from when I moved out at 18. It wasn't much. It wasn't the $1 million house in Upper Arlington with the 3-car garage and the chef's kitchen. But it was mine. It was safe. And for the first time in 18 months, no one was watching where I went or questioning what I did. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I just sat in the passenger seat of my father's truck and breathed. For the first time in 18 months, I breathed without asking permission. And that was enough. 2 weeks after the hearing, Pastor David Hensley called. I almost didn't answer. The last time we'd spoken, he'd been delivering Judith's version of events like it was gospel, but something made me pick up. Maya, I owe you an apology. His voice was different now, heavier, like he'd been carrying something he needed to put down. I believed Judith without asking questions. That was wrong of me. What changed? A long pause. The court documents became public record. Some of the congregation, they started asking questions about the money, about the text messages, about whether we'd all been told the truth. I sat down on my father's couch, processing this. What happened to Judith? She resigned from the church board last Sunday, said it was for personal reasons, but everyone knows. He sighed. Maya, I'm not calling to make excuses. I just wanted you to know that not everyone believed her in the end, and I'm sorry I wasn't one of the first to see through it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet living room and thought about those 8 church members who had sat in the courtroom gallery, ready to testify about Judith's character. I wondered how many of them had read the court documents. I wondered how many of them had finally understood what "keep her dependent" really meant. I didn't call any of them. I didn't need their apologies or their validation. The judge had already given me something better, official recognition that I wasn't crazy, wasn't ungrateful, wasn't the problem. Judith Wheeler had spent years building her reputation as a pillar of the community. It had taken one afternoon in a courtroom to tear it down. The truth has a way of spreading, even when no one says it out loud. Derek's email arrived 3 weeks after the hearing. He couldn't contact me directly. The protection order prohibited it, so he sent the message through his lawyer to mine. Rachel forwarded it to me with a note. You don't have to respond, but I thought you should see it. I opened it on a Tuesday morning, sitting at my father's kitchen table, while Lily played with blocks on the floor. Maya, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I don't know what else to say. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. My mother said she was helping, and I believed her. I should have listened to you. I should have paid attention. I want to see Lily. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but she's my daughter too. Please, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Derek. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and watched Lily stack her blocks into a wobbly tower. He didn't apologize for what he did. He apologized for not realizing how bad things had gotten, as if he hadn't been there the whole time, watching his mother take my car, track my phone, drain our savings. As if he hadn't typed, "You think she'd actually go?" in a text message and then followed his mother's instructions to keep me trapped. I responded through Rachel. Visitation will be determined at the full custody hearing. All communication must go through legal counsel. Derek didn't write back. I think he expected me to soften, to remember the man I'd married and give him another chance. But the man I'd married had watched me walk 2.3 miles on a sprained ankle with his daughter on my hip. That man didn't deserve another chance. He deserved exactly what he got: supervised visitation and a court order. The full custody hearing was on December 14th. By then, the $47,000 had been restored to a new account in my name only. Derek had to sell the secret apartment on Riverside Drive to come up with the money. My Honda Accord was parked in my father's driveway, washed and detailed, with a full tank of gas. Judge Holloway reviewed the case one final time. The evidence hadn't changed. If anything, the additional documentation Rachel had gathered made it even more damning. credit card statements showing purchases I'd never made, phone records showing the 17 calls Judith made the day I had a panic attack at the grocery store, testimony from my doctor about the untreated sprain and the vitamin deficiencies. The ruling took less than 20 minutes. Full custody of the minor child Lily Wheeler is awarded to Maya Watson Wheeler, Judge Holloway announced. Derek Wheeler is granted supervised visitation 4 hours per week at a licensed facility. Judith Wheeler is prohibited from any contact with the minor child until she completes a court-approved course on family boundaries and healthy relationships. I signed the paperwork in the clerk's office afterward. My hand was steady. My signature was clear. "Congratulations," Rachel said as we walked out of the courthouse. "You did it." "We did it," she shook her head. "I just presented the evidence. You're the one who gathered it. You're the one who walked out of that house at 3 in the morning with nothing but your daughter and the truth. Lily was mine. Legally, officially, permanently mine. And no one would ever take her from me again." I drove home in my own car, with my daughter in the back seat, and I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. 3 months after the final hearing, I started a new job. Morrison Financial Group wasn't my old company, but it was better. The position was Senior Financial Analyst, the same title I'd held before, but with a 15% raise, $72,000 a year, benefits, a 401k match, an office with a window. The interview had been terrifying. I'd been out of the workforce for 18 months, and I was sure they'd see the gap on my resume and wonder what was wrong with me. Instead, the hiring manager, a woman named Sandra, who wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, asked me one question that mattered. "Why did you leave your previous position?" I could have lied. I could have said I wanted to spend time with my daughter, that I'd taken a break to focus on family, that it was a personal choice. Instead, I told the truth. I was in a controlling relationship. I was isolated from my career, my finances, and my family. I spent 18 months trying to survive, and then I spent 3 months rebuilding. I'm ready to work again. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she took off her glasses and looked at me. "My sister went through something similar," she said. "It took her 5 years to get out. I'm glad you only needed 18 months. She offered me the job that afternoon. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Westerville, 10 minutes from my father's house. I enrolled Lily in daycare, a bright, cheerful place with finger painting and music time and teachers who sent me photos throughout the day. And I bought a new car, a Toyota Camry, silver, with my name on the title. Only my name. Every time I start the engine, I remember, I am free. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine the conversation I'll have with Lily when she's older. She's 2 now, walking and talking, starting to form memories that will stay with her. She won't remember the house in Upper Arlington or the grandmother who tried to control her mother. She won't remember the courtroom or the protection order or the night we left at 3 a.m. with nothing but a diaper bag and the truth. But someday she'll ask. Kids always ask. "Mom, why don't we see Grandma Judith? Why does Dad only visit on Saturdays with that lady watching?" And I'll have to find the words. I've practiced them in my head 100 times. I've imagined sitting across from her at a kitchen table, maybe in this apartment, maybe somewhere else, somewhere we've built together, and explaining what happened without making her feel like she has to choose sides. "When you were very little," I'll say, "some people in our family made choices that weren't healthy. They tried to control Mommy in ways that weren't okay, and Mommy had to leave to keep us both safe." She'll have more questions. She'll want to know why. She'll want to understand how people who were supposed to love us could hurt us so badly. I don't have all the answers yet. Maybe I never will. But I know this. When Lily grows up, she'll know that her mother fought for her. She'll know that women deserve respect and autonomy and the right to make their own choices. She'll know that love isn't supposed to feel like a cage, and if she ever finds herself in a situation like mine, she'll know that leaving is always an option. Because her mother left, and her mother survived. I keep a list now. It's not written down anywhere, just a set of rules I carry in my head, boundaries I've drawn around my life like a fence around a garden. They're simple, but they're non-negotiable. No one controls my finances without my knowledge and consent. No one isolates me from the people who love me. No one tells me I should be grateful while taking away my freedom. No one tracks my location without my permission. And if anyone ever makes me feel like I need permission to exist, I leave. I call my father every Sunday. We talk about Lily, about work, about the weather. Sometimes we don't talk about anything important at all. We just sit on the phone together, comfortable in the silence, grateful for the connection. I've made new friends. Women from work, mothers from Lily's daycare, neighbors in my apartment building. People who don't know the whole story, who just know me as Maya, the analyst with the cute daughter and the silver Camry. I don't hate Judith, I don't hate Derek. Hate takes energy, and I've spent too much energy on them already. What I feel now is something quieter. A firm, clear boundary that says they are not welcome in my life. Not because I'm angry, but because I've learned what happens when I let people cross lines they shouldn't cross. The difference between revenge and boundaries is simple. Revenge is about hurting someone else. Boundaries are about protecting yourself. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I'm just not willing to be hurt anymore. That's the lesson I'll teach Lily when she's old enough to understand. You don't have to be cruel to be strong. You just have to know where you end and other people begin. And you have to be willing to defend that line. If you're watching this and the story sounds familiar, if you've ever been told you should be grateful while everything was being taken from you, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're not the problem. What you're experiencing has a name. It's called coercive control, and it's a form of abuse. It doesn't leave bruises, but it leaves scars. It doesn't break bones, but it breaks something deeper. Your sense of self, your belief in your own reality, your trust in your own judgment. And you can get out. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you've ever done. You might have to leave with nothing but a diaper bag and the truth. You might have to rebuild your entire life from scratch, but you can do it. The truth doesn't need 15 character witnesses. The truth just needs evidence. And sometimes the truth just needs one person, a father, a friend, a stranger, to ask one simple question. Are you okay? My father asked me that question on an October afternoon. He saw me limping down a suburban street with my daughter on my hip, and he didn't look away. He didn't assume everything was fine. He stopped his truck and asked. That question changed my life. If you're still watching, maybe you're that person for someone else. Maybe there's a friend, a sister, a coworker who's been disappearing slowly, who always seems tired, who never goes anywhere alone anymore. Ask them, just ask. You might be the one who helps them find their way out. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe. And check the description for more stories about strength, boundaries, and justice. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support the channel. And if you want to hear more stories about strength, boundaries, and justice, check out the next video in the description. Comment below and let me know. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you once trusted? I read every comment. See you in the next video.